Good evening, everybody. Vacation Bible School, night number 4 of 5. I say that not for the kids, but for the adults to know that you're almost there. You've almost made it. You've got tonight, tomorrow night. You can do this, I promise. We have all the faith in the world that you can do this. For my teachers and group leaders, help us out with the clock tonight. Make sure that you hang in there until the end of your session, if not maybe a minute or two after. We've had a couple of times where groups have either stayed, I've left too early, and that puts some pressure on these group leaders to keep up with them. So if you'll help us out, teachers, group leaders, everybody, that would be awesome. Tonight, to get started, we're going to sing a few songs. All right, are you guys ready? I mean, the energy level feels really low. Like it feels really, really low. Is it the nature sounds? Is that what it is? Is that what it is? Putting everybody to sleep? All right, stand up. Stand up. Okay, now, for this song, it is, I've got Joy Like a Fountain. Okay, do you guys know how to make a fountain? Okay, you have multiple choices. This is always a favorite. Okay, but you create your own fountain, however you desire. 5th and 6th grade boys will be doing the Standing We're Angry at the World fountain, apparently. Everybody, 1, 2, 3. 5th and 6th grade boys, put a smile on that face. 1, 2, 3. Okay, all right, we're getting better. My own child is rebelling. I will deal with him later. So we got Joy Like a Fountain. Okay, we've got Peace Like a River. Okay, easy enough, right? And then you've got Love. And this is everybody's favorite. You get to perform a surfing pose of some type because it's love like an ocean. Okay, so everybody got that? Joy like a fountain, peace like a river, love like an ocean. I expect full participation. Teenagers on both sides. Okay, all right, here we go. I've got joy like a fountain. I've got joy like a fountain. I've got joy like a fountain in my soul. I've got joy like a fountain. I've got joy like a fountain. I've got joy like a fountain in my soul. I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river in my soul. I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river in my soul. All right, everybody's favorite. I've got love like an ocean. I've got love like an ocean. I've got love like an ocean in my soul. I've got love like an ocean. I've got love like an ocean. I've got love like an ocean in my soul. Now, can you do all three? I've got joy like a fountain. I've got peace like a river. I've got joy like a fountain. I've got peace like a river. I've got love in my soul. All right, have a seat. Energy level way down. Should we do booster to start tonight? See, that got a reaction out of them. I don't intend to do booster at all. Oh, is this thing on? Oops. I've got the joy, 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 joy down in my... Where? Where? I've got the joy, 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 joy down in my... Where? And I'm so happy, so very happy. I've got the love of Jesus in my heart, down in my heart. And I'm so happy, so very happy. I've got the peace that passes understanding down in my... Where? Where? I've got the peace that passes understanding down in my heart. Where? And I'm so happy, so very happy. I got the love of Jesus in my heart, down in my heart. And I'm so happy, so very happy. I've got the love of Jesus in my heart. I've got the wonderful love of my blessed Redeemer way down in the depths of my heart. Where? Where? I've got the wonderful love of my blessed Redeemer way down in the depths of my heart. Where? And I'm so happy, so very happy. I've got the love of Jesus in my heart. Okay, here we go. And if the devil doesn't like it, he can sit on attack. Sit on attack. Sit on attack. And if the devil doesn't sit on attack, he stay. And I'm so happy. Down in my heart, and I'm so happy, so very happy. I've got the love of Jesus in my heart. Good job, guys. Okay, nursery. The huge explosion of a class. Evelina, you are the rock star. Nursery, you guys can be dismissed. 2s and 3s, you guys can be dismissed as well. All right, 4s and summer 6. 4s and summer 6. You can't say 4s. All right, 1st and 2nd. Third and 4th. Fifth and 6th. Good job, 5th and 6th. Way to carry the entire clapping thing, and then the teenagers let you down. Yep. All right, teenagers, you need to go with Mr. Derek. That would be this guy right over here. Right there. Right there. If you don't know him, get to know him. He's a good human. Kaylee Phillips, don't leave. You got to turn off the birds. Mike Fry is not doing a meditation session tonight or teaching a yoga class, so you have to turn the birds off. All right, adults, if you will sort of maybe slide to the middle 2 sections, that would be awesome. That way Mr. Mike can see all of you. So if y'all will slide this way, we'll get Mr. Mike hooked up with a microphone, and then we'll begin our adult class.
2, 1, 2. Yes. Mr. Shane, you up there hiding, sir? Okay, we're going to do night number 4, lesson 4. We are going to continue our creation evolution discussion tonight as we have in previous nights, except for Scott, who went off the reservation last night and did his own thing, but very applicable to this and the will and power of God to create the wonderful universe and world in which we live. And we are very, hopefully, much in the belief in creation and not evolution. And we've seen numerous reasons why this could not be true. And tonight we're going to kind of focus on the animal kingdom, evolution in the animal kingdom. I had a thought last night. We were talking about evolution, and some of the comments that I've made in my slightly older age than I have been in the past. I think that's true of everybody. But as I get older, I find myself sitting on the porch and watching the birds and just all kinds of things going on around the house. And I make the comment to Barbara all the time about the hummingbirds. And to me, that is a classic example of why evolution is not a thing. That these guys haven't figured out over the millennial that the evolutionists would have you believe of how things have progressed, that these guys still fight over a bird feeder that has 6 or 12 outlets on it, yet they'll run each other off instead of just finally learning that they could just sit there and drink to their heart's content. But the drive to constantly be quicker, faster, better than everybody else that's around there, to me, it doesn't make sense. I know that survival of the fittest is also a huge process in the evolution thing. I also think about all the armadillos and raccoons that haven't learned about the roads yet, and you'd think they would have also learned not to go into those roads, but they still do. So again, I tongue-in-cheek say that to me proves that evolution is not a thing, because it looks like they would have figured that out by now. But they're going. And I keep looking. Here we go. We're getting closer. We're getting closer. We're going to breeze through some of these slides. I get to christen my usage of this slide projector and see if that's going to work for us. Do I need to push the button to get the first one, or are you guys going to get the first one? Wait, was that a wait a minute sign? Yes, okay, there's a thumbs up. If you've never looked from here up to there, you can't see anybody except the backside of a bunch of monitors. So we just know that those guys are up there and doing a great job for us, putting the slides up there. I'm going to do quite a bit of reading, and we'll have some discussions, and I'm going to skip some of these things because there's some big words in here that I cannot pronounce. But we're going to talk about the animal kingdom and the biological evolution. We've learned this week that the Bible does not allow for evolution to be true, so theistic evolution isn't an option. Therefore, either creation is true or godless evolution is true. But as we've seen on previous nights, there is no evidence to support the self-creation of the universe. You can't have something from nothing. And so something had to put something there initially. And they can't answer it. And we're going to definitely kind of talk about that and how some of the Some of the renowned scientists in the past have finally come to that conclusion. Nor is there evidence that the universe is as old as required by evolutionary theory. And then Mr. David talked about that a couple nights ago. In fact, there are scientific evidences which just as easily provide support for a young universe, and yet evolution is still accepted by many as a legitimate scientific explanation for the universe. The problem with evolutionary theory, however, doesn't stop with the origin, age, and evolution of the universe itself. Biological evolution, or macroevolution, we're going to hear that term a little bit more tonight, is just as much a problem as is cosmic evolution. At some point or points in the past, evolution is true. Life must have arisen from lifelessness and somehow changed into all the species which have ever roamed planet Earth. Does the evidence support biological evolution? Before life can evolve, life has to exist, and that's the something from nothing argument. If evolution is true, that first life had to come about from non-life, a phenomenon called abiogenesis, or spontaneous generation. Abiogenesis, however, has long been acknowledged to be an unprovable, though necessary part of evolution. You have to have abiogenesis if evolution is going to be true. Now, here we go. Hourglass down at the very bottom right-hand side. A little wine glass looking thing. We were close. We were so close. Bobby, don't make me come up there. You were there. You were there. Put it back. We'll continue while they do that. It was going to be the first slide with a part of this quote that's up here in slide number 4. In 1960, a gentleman by the name of G.A. Kirkut published The Implications of Evolution. Therein he listed 7 non-provable assumptions upon which evolution is based. The first assumption is that non-living things gave rise to living material. For example, spontaneous generation occurred. In spite of the admission that evolution is based on non-provable assumptions, many today in the evolutionary community boldly assert that their theory is a scientific fact. However, the unbiased observer must ask, what does the scientific evidence actually have to say about the origin of life? There we go. Thank you. Let me see if this part works. Slide number next. You guys that have used this, I'm assuming I'm just pushing this little green arrow button and it should go to the next slide. David, yes, you use it? Yeah, think so. Which way do you want me to point it? That way? That way? Nothing. I'm getting a green light, but does not seem to be changing. We'll do this the old-fashioned way. Next slide, please. The work of various scientists over the centuries disproved the superstitious idea that life can come from non-life. 3 prominent individuals, I only recognized one of these, Francesco Redi, Lazzaro Spallanzani, and Louis Pasteur, is generally acknowledged to be the scientist whose experiments drove nails into the proverbial abiogenesis coffin. And remember, abiogenesis is that life can occur from nothing. Even standard evolution-based biology textbooks have historically acknowledged that fact. For example, one such popular textbook stated it was not until 1864 in the elegant experiment of French scientist Louis Pasteur that the hypothesis of spontaneous generation was finally disproved. They acknowledged that Pasteur, like Reedy and Spallanzani before him, had shown that life comes only from life. The truth is so absolute that it has been deemed a scientific law. Again, Mr. David talked about that on Monday night, about laws versus theories. The law of biogenesis, not abiogenesis. Evolutionist George C. Simpson, perhaps the most influential paleontologist of the 20th century, articulated well the findings of science. There is no serious doubt that biogenesis is the rule, that life comes only from other life, that a cell, which is the unit of life itself, is always and exclusively the product or offspring of another cell. So a lot of those things that we have just said, that I've just read, sums up in that you can't have something from nothing. It has to start from somewhere. There we go. Let me try this one more time. Wow. Look at that. All right. Though many attempts have been made to initiate life from non-life, none have succeeded. Leading evolutionary biologists have been forced to acknowledge, therefore, that abiogenesis is impossible, absurd, and an obsolete concept, but without it, evolution can't even get started. Notice the following acknowledged by leading evolutionists over the years. Evolutionist and Nobel laureate George Wald of Harvard University wrote, "As for spontaneous generation, it continued to find acceptance until finally disposed of by the work of Louis Pasteur." He further admitted, one has only to contemplate the magnitude of this task to concede that the spontaneous generation of a living organism is impossible. Yet here we are, as a result, I believe, Mr. Wald says, of spontaneous generation. And we notice that his belief in spontaneous generation is not based on the actual evidence, but instead on blind faith in evolution in spite of the evidence. So he admits that, but yet still believes that evolution is the way that the universe came to be. In the lecture series, Origins of Life, evolutionary geologist Robert Hazen made notable admissions. The origin of life is a subject of immense complexity, and I have to tell you right up front, we don't know how life began. How can I tell you about the origin of life when we are so woefully ignorant of that history? Evolutionists don't know how life could emerge from non-life within their theory, but they believe in it anyway. Evolutionist Paul Davies, theoretical physicist, cosmologist, astrobiologist, and professor at Arizona State University, writing in The New Scientist, said, "One of the great outstanding scientific mysteries is the origin of life. How did it happen? The truth is, nobody has a clue." That's what he says, nobody has a clue. Evolutionist John Horgan did not even try to veil his admission with an article. He titled one of his articles, "Don't Tell the Christians," or "Don't Tell the Creationists, but Scientists Don't Have a Clue How Life Began." Such admissions are quite telling, albeit incorrect. Very good. What Davies and Hogan mean is no naturalistic evolutionist has a clue. Biblical supernaturalists, on the other hand, us, know exactly how life originated. And the answer harmonizes perfectly with the law of biogenesis, unlike evolution's life origins fairy tale. If one sticks with the evidence, he must conclude that to believe life can come from non-life would be irrational, unscientific, and requires blind faith in evolution. So the nature of the first life is the problem that we have. Life coming from non-life through an insurmountable barrier is actually the easy part. The difficulty of getting life from non-life is so overwhelming that we usually fail to realize other daunting aspects of the equation that compound the difficulty of the problem of evolution. Skip these two. Famous evolutionary biologist Richard Dawkins stated in an interview with Ben Stein regarding the origin of life, "Nobody knows how it got started. We know the kind of event that it must have been. We know the sort of event that must have happened for the origin of life. It was the origin of the first self-replicating molecule. Obviously, the first life had to already have been functioning. Obviously, the first life had to already have the functionality to reproduce. Yet another hurdle that would be impossible for evolutionists to jump." Mr. Stein asked Dawkins, "Right, and how did that happen?" Dawkins replied, "I've told you, we don't know." Stein then said, "So you have no idea how it started?" And Dawkins replied, "No, nor has anybody." John Kiosian, biology professor at Rutgers University, "Even conceptually, it is difficult to see how a system satisfying the minimum criteria for a living thing can arise by chance and simultaneously include a mechanism containing the suitable information for its own replication." We would agree to that again, something from nothing is impossible, and that something has to have the ability to replicate itself. No wonder abiogenesis is deemed by many evolutionists to require, get this, a miracle that requires blind faith on the part of the evolutionists to accept. But the problem for evolutionists doesn't stop there either. Evolutionist John Maddox, writing in Nature, said, "It is disappointing that the origin of the genetic code is still obscure as the origin of life itself." The genetic information it goes on to talk about is one of the parts as we've learned about DNA and how those particular things all have to be correct in order to produce that particular organism or being, be it animal or man, has to be in there. And so, again, to think about how complex that situation would have been from a single cell molecule or a single cell itself to start replicating and then to evolve into something also has to have that DNA, as we now know, has to be present in those individuals. And that's what gives it its composition, its character, its features, and ultimately we're able to trace back to where it all came from or where we came from. Something that becomes a very complicated thing. Mainstream evolutionary thinking today is that genetic mutations coupled with natural selection will create the best fit species, a belief known as neo-Darwinism. Once again, however, genes must already exist in order for them to be mutated. Where did the first simple genome come from? And how could new genetic information, new raw material, be subsequently spontaneously created naturally as origin life forms morphed into other life forms? In the words of the late and famous evolutionary paleontologist of Harvard University, Stephen Jay Gould, a mutation doesn't produce major new raw material. So this to me was kind of inferring again as some of the things that we've already discussed this week, that, as a matter of fact, last night and or the night before, that how come there are still chimpanzees or apes if we're now a descendant of them? That you can't mutate into something that wasn't already there, and you can't necessarily grow gills if you didn't have them from the beginning, and so on and so forth. So, consider the analogy of making a digital copy of a file from a computer onto a flash drive. When a file is copied, mutations can sometimes occur. The file doesn't always copy properly. The final copy isn't always exactly like the original. Codon errors, duplications, translocations, deletions, and other mutations exist in genetics. Errors that cause the final copy to be mutated. Do such mutations add new raw material? Do they write a new sentence in the file? Well, of course not. So they can't create anything more than what was already there. It can get messed up, but they can't create new things. A mutation might cause a fly to have extra wings, homeotic mutations, I think I'm saying that correctly, or a person to have an extra toe, polydactyl. But mutations don't create new features or a new creature. A mutation wouldn't cause a wing to appear on a creature, for example, unless the creature already had wings in its genome or DNA. We have much more of similar examples here. But again, you can't change what is already by design of a particular individual. You can create mutations of what's there, but you can't create new things. Bottom line, evolution has no way of getting life from non-life and no way to evolve it into something different when it arrives. Once again, the evolutionist must rely on blind faith to hold his position. Problem number 4, yes. In order for a belief to be rational, it must have sufficient supporting evidence. Biblical creation is rational since it is based on evidence that the Bible is of divine origin. Is belief in evolution a rational belief or a blind faith? Where's the evidence for evolution? When a student takes biology classes in public high school or college, he will most likely find a section in his textbook listed of alleged evidences for evolution. Upon closer examination, without exception, these evidences can be categorized as being one of 3 possibilities: erroneous evidences, irrelevant evidences, and inadequate evidences. An example of erroneous evidences would be one that Mr. Haeckel came up with. Living in the turn of the 19th century, asserted that embryos in their development in the womb repeat the evolutionary history of their species. Though his idea quickly became embedded in evolutionary-friendly textbooks, his claims were eventually found to be a hoax. Upon confrontation, Haeckel eventually acknowledged that several of the charts he used to promote his theory were fabricated to support his theory. Some of us may have or may have not seen some of Mr. Haeckel's information, or we see this horse chart. Textbooks often have charts allegedly documenting the evolution of horses from the small fox-like creature known as, these are the words that I was going to skip, Eohippus or Hyracotherium. Several decades ago, however, leading paleontologists acknowledged that the uniform, continuous transformation of the Hypocotherium into equus, modern horses, so dear to the hearts of generations of textbook writers, never actually happened in nature. We have examples of the whales and then the fossils. Another fancy word there. In lesson 3 of this, we discussed the powerful testimony of the fossil record in support of creation and against evolution. While there should be billions of transitional fossils linking all life forms to previous ancestors, if Darwin was correct, there are no undisputed transitional forms. As time passes, the latest alleged transitional fossil is ultimately reconsidered and marked off the list of supposed evidences. Tiktaalik, for example, has been hailed as the transitional creature linking fish and amphibians, a creature whose pelvic fins, front fins, are thought to have been evolving into legs. However, in 2010, researchers in Poland discovered four-limbed animal tracks in fossil strata believed to be 9 million years older than the Tiktaalik strata. How could Tiktaalik be the transitional from fish to legged amphibians if four-legged creatures were already around and fully functional 9 million years before the Tiktaalik was on the scene? So using some of these extreme years against the evolutionists, that, and if they believe in all the strata and how this stuff was laid down over these millions and millions of years, going, hey, we found something 9 million years before your fossil that you saw, that you claim to created legs from fins, but yet we see 9 million, I put that in the air quotes, 9 million years prior to that this animal already had limbs and legs. So we also get to the irrelevant evidences of natural selection. When a species isn't as well suited to a particular habitat as another species, it is less fit. Species doesn't migrate to a different environment that is more suited for, and more fit species will tend to thrive, and less fit species will tend to die out. That is natural selection, and it is accepted by creationists. However, natural selection in no way supports the idea that a fish can turn into an amphibian or a dinosaur can turn into a bird. As discussed earlier, natural selection is merely a filtering mechanism which cannot act until a species already exists. My hummingbirds, they will continue to fight, and the fittest is going to be the one that gets the juice, even though they could learn that they could all 12 or 15 of them line up there and eat as long as they wanted. Evolution requires the appearance of a new creation, a new creature, before natural selection can do its work. Natural selection, therefore, is an irrelevant evidence in regard to macroevolution. It neither supports it nor defends it or refutes it. Evolutionists have tried to use that as things change and species evolves. I'm going to something about hummingbirds that I saw. I'm stuck on that one, but these really pronounced curved beaks, and it's to allow them to get down into these particular flowers that they like to drink from. That would be one of these natural selection and natural occurrences, but that hummingbird had to exist initially for that to occur. This talks about this, and this is a fairly long section here. I'll try to shorten it somewhat. About Mr. Darwin. Went to the Galapagos Island and saw these birds there, the beak size and the shape to evolve. There must be enough heritable variation in those traits to provide raw material for natural selection. In other words, possible variation seen among the finches that he saw, some were darker than some were lighter, was all inherited from the original ancestor. It wasn't spontaneously generated from thin air. The variation was already built into the species. Nothing new came about, but macroevolution requires new material. Again, geographic distribution is an irrelevant evidence of macroevolution. Just because something got lighter, something got darker because of its environment is not necessarily supporting evolution. Inadequate evidences. Admittedly, one category of alleged evidence for evolution stands as unrefuted potential evidence for evolution. The evidence is not adequate evidence. However, considering that the same evidence can be used with better consistency in support of biblical creation as well. wants to try that word for me right there? Good. Evolutionists argue that similarities in different life are every bit as much evidence for our relation to them as our similarities to our human ancestors. So we get to the monkeys. It is true that if we're related to someone, we'd predict that there to be similarities between us. We share similarities with our parents, for example. However, as Darwin himself observed, similarities are often seen in species that clearly share no common ancestor. That concession begs the question then, how do evolutionists really know which species are actually related and which aren't? Similar bone structures between birds and dinosaurs, or between chimps and humans, for example, don't necessarily suggest relationship. Could there be a different explanation? Actually, yes. There's a perfect explanation that fits the evidence better. In creation, rather than evolution is true, then similarities seen between different kinds would suggest, I thought this was probably the best part of this whole thing, a common designer rather than a common ancestor. Car manufacturers often might use the same features and car parts on multiple models, tires, brakes, windshield wipers, light bulbs, etc., rather than reinventing the wheel for each and every new model. If a particular part was proven to be the most effective part and it can be used multiple times in other applications, it would be extremely inefficient for an engineer to use a different part of design on a new part in all designs. Car manufacturers often even design various car models with a similar look that distinguishes their brand from others. And of course, that's money driven more times than not. If I can use something on multiple vehicles, that's fine, but have a common designer, not a common ancestor. Similarly, one would expect God is an efficient engineer to use similar structures in many life forms on Earth. Since they were all designed to live on the same planet, those designed to live in similar environments on Earth and do similar things would be expected to be even more similar than other species. Those creatures who would be breathing air would be expected to have lungs with similarities. Many of those creatures designed for swimming in water might often have fins, gills, and so on. If the same designer was behind the different kinds of animals on the earth, one would expect similarities between them. And of course, there are. Which view, common ancestor or common designer, fits the evidence better and more consistently? Several evidences could be highlighted which reveal the superiority of the creation model in explaining the evidence. Let's look at one. Recall again the earlier section on geographic distribution. While similarities between those species living in the same relative environment, species that are distinctive from those found elsewhere, is admittedly suggested of either a common designer or a possible common ancestry through, once again, not macroevolutionary ancestry. The second category is similar observed by Darwin. Creatures similar though not related is a problem for macroevolution. In the case of descent from a common ancestor, the genetic potential for similarities between descendants is at least possible through someone would have to create the heritable variation in the first place. But when common ancestry has been ruled out, there is no means of creating the observed similar features between creatures. A common designer, therefore, is the reasonable conclusion from the evidence for both of Darwin's observation. Even if the Big Bang could create the universe and explain away all of the inconsistencies we see when studying the cosmos, at some point, in order for biological evolution to occur, life had to come from non-life. If that wasn't a difficult enough feat, that life had to be extremely complex. More complex we might typically even realize. It had to have an operating program that told it how to function. It had to be able to replicate itself. It had to be equipped with the necessary genome to allow life to continue. That pool of genetic information had to be continually increased spontaneously over millions of years in order to allow that single-celled organism to turn into all of the species on the planet, ending with a genetically complex species we call Homo sapiens. The pool had to increase in spite of the fact that there is no known way to spontaneously generate such information in a natural way. With such facts established, it should come as no surprise to find that evolution has never been able to be substantiated by solid evidence. Its alleged evidences are always, without exception, erroneous, irrelevant, or at the very least, inadequate. Belief in evolution, therefore, requires one to hold a blind faith in a superstitious fairy tale. It's no wonder that the late Colin Patterson, senior paleontologist at the British Museum of Natural History in London, said about evolution. One morning I woke up and something had happened in the night, and it struck me that I had been working on this stuff for 20 years, and there was not one thing I knew about it. That's quite a shock to learn that one could be misled so long. Either there was something wrong with me, or there was something wrong with evolutionary theory. Again, many more facts, as we have previously discussed in the nights prior, about evolution. And number one, why it's still a theory and not a law. And these are more factual pieces of information that says, to start with, for evolution to have occurred, you had to start with something. And many of these renowned scientists, even some of them admitted in their lifetime that that had to be some kind of miraculous, supernatural thing that brought that on. And now they're right back in our boat that we believe in that supernatural being. God had the ability to create the universe that we live in and all of the living things on this planet that are here today. And that the word evolution, almost something that we don't like to use because it immediately makes us think about all these stuff that we're talking about this week, but that there can be variations and changes within a species on the earth to adapt to their environment. But again, that doesn't change that species of animal, and it doesn't create a new animal from the existing one that God created. Some things have lived out their life and become extinct through various reasons and are no longer on this planet, be it because of man, because of the environment that caused them to die out. But we see through this, and even the more complex thing about the whole DNA and the genome structure of our bodies and the DNA that is within the other animals that live on this earth, an extremely complex system. Is it hard to believe that God, could just speak it and make it happen? Not if we have the faith that we should have to believe in that. That he could create this earth is the only logical explanation. We believe that the Bible is the inspired word of God, and that what the Bible says is infallible and true, and that God created heavens and the earth in 6 days, and then he took a day off. That's a pretty maybe tough to swallow. If somebody has a lack of faith in God, then that's a fairy tale to them. But we have to have that faith in God that he is capable of creating this earth, and that evolution, through a lot of the factual information and stuff that I droned on about tonight, can't be proven that it didn't. And for me, Mike personally, is that I come back to that. You can't have something from nothing. And so even if, I don't want to go that far, but something miraculous had to occur to get that first cell, that first organism, in order for any of the evolution theory to be at least palatable. And nobody is able to explain where that first thing came from. So then logically, especially for this group, it makes a whole lot more sense that God was able to speak it into existence. That's all I have for you tonight, unless there's comments, questions. No, don't ask me any questions, because I'll try to go find it in this book and answer it, but any comment?
Look at all research. It only science and everything, and boil right down to what God said.
Yep.
It would have been so much easier and a lot less money spent if they just took the Bible for face value and let it go.
Yeah, admitted defeat and moved on to something else, instead of continuing. Sometimes, I don't know, I try to almost look at this like a child, as a kid growing up, and when I get caught doing something by my parents and trying to come up with some story that was fitting the scenario, that's kind of how I look at these guys. That, number one, they just automatically believe that they don't believe in God. So therefore, we have to try to prove this and spend all that time that you're thinking about, that you're mentioning, David.
They go through all that
Yep.
to try to disprove the Bible.
Right.
Final analysis, they just go over and say, well, I guess it's up to
Yeah. Yes, ma'am. If they get gone, if they become extinct, if we believe, of course, none of us would be around to see that, but if we believe in evolution that says something's going to ultimately fill that gap that's occurred, Yes. Wow. Yes, ma'am. Doesn't make a lot of sense from that regard, for sure. Anything else? Thank you for your patience and willingness to come and to the class. Much appreciated. That will be all. Go eat. They got some hot dogs left over from last night just for you, bro. Okay.